Welcome back, and thank you very much for staying with us and to take a look at what's happening in the world of business. My name is Colin Lemawan. The coronavirus pandemic has a negative impact on the global economy, with many governments locking down their countries in order to stop the spread of COVID-19. But that's not the only area that has been impacted by the virus. Let's talk to Sifiso Falala, who is the CEO of Plus94, so that we can get a glimpse on how this impact is really cascading to other sectors of the economy. Thank you very much for coming through, Sifiso.
Thank you very much, Colin. Yeah, you're right. This virus has had such a huge impact, and the thing is that no one saw it coming, no one expected it, and understandably businesses were not ready for it. And the big question now is, what are we going to do about it?
Well, the question has been, number one, what should African countries do in as far as seeking relief from the IMF? Because the conditions are, the impression may be that they will be going to financial institutions that are international with cap in hand.
You know, absolutely, the impact on them, not just from the absolute impact of the virus itself. It is predicted, or it has been predicted, that the impact could be devastating on African countries, more than what we've already seen in other parts of the world, which is frightening to even think about. But also on their economies, which are very brittle, where there's a lot of poverty. People live in slums and live below the poverty line. So the big question for them is in terms of solidarity, working together, looking at things like the African Development Bank, looking at institutions within the continent that can be built, that can better prepare the continent for such events in future.
So are we ever going to see the world doing business differently post-COVID-19?
No, absolutely. I think one of the most important changes that we are going to see is a more rapid realization of our reliance on the Northern Hemisphere in terms of development, in terms of aid, in terms of funding. And the fact that the Northern Hemisphere itself does not have an answer readily to hand on this COVID-19 and may not have an answer for the next 18 to 24 months does show even to the African continent that they don't have all the answers. And we should perhaps, as a continent, the thinking could be start looking at developing solutions, looking at ourselves inside Africa in terms of intra-African trade, and invest more in infrastructure, invest more in terms of risk mitigation and reducing the impact of events such as pandemics.
Yeah, so moving goods and people as well as capital would play a role in stimulating economies. But then how will things be done given the bilateral relations that we have, looking at, for example, AGOA, the post-Brexit relations with South Africa's economic relations, Europe as well as China and Russia?
Yeah, and you can see that of the total African trade, only about 20% is intra-Africa. And this over-reliance on the North, the Northern Hemisphere, in terms of the funding of economies, in terms of development initiatives, in terms of technology and science, I think it's a big lesson that the continent should be learning. That it's fine to have these agreements and bilaterals with the rest of the world, and they're important because there's so much we can import from them in terms of know-how. But these agreements need not be exclusive of agreements that can be arrived at within SADC, within the AU, within the African continent. So there's a total lack, there's a total deficit of substantial financial arrangements and provision for times such as this, without involving the United Nations, without involving the aid agencies. And I think the big lesson that has to be learned is that we're completely unprotected and not ready for events such as what we are experiencing right now.
All right, so on the local front, we've heard the DA calling for a smart lockdown. How do you think this will pan out in South Africa, trying to mitigate the impact of the spread of COVID-19? And on the other hand, the Freedom Front Plus saying that it would not really encourage its members to donate to any cause that has to do with relief measures if it's based on the notion of black economic empowerment. What do you make out of this?
Now, I think we have a major crisis of international proportions. And the big thing about this crisis is that it's a threat to human life, and that has to be a priority. In terms of the type of lockdown that we have, essential services are running, and they were excluded from the lockdown on purpose. And the reason for that is that there is so much about the virus itself that is still not known. There was a school of thought a few weeks back when it was appropriate to wear gloves, when it was appropriate to wear a mask, and then you shouldn't wear a mask, then you should wear a mask. And then there was a time when we thought that the virus was airborne, then it wasn't airborne, then it's airborne. So there's so much that is still out there that's not known about this particular virus. And because of that, we cannot afford to be taking chances. And I think as we learn more and more sectors of the business will begin to open based on their exposure to risk and the chances that we might end up with a situation on our hands that we will not be able to cope with. So I don't think that we can talk at this stage of a smart shutdown, because smart shutdowns assume that you already have sufficient information to be able to implement a smart solution. I think we have some information, but during the course of coming days and weeks, we will see certain sectors of the economy begin to operate again. And with regards to the question around the BEE and the economic stimulus package, I think it has to be clear, if we are talking of an economic stimulus package, that it is an economic stimulus package and not a grant and not a developmental kind of aid. And it should be based hopefully on the probability that the businesses that do get it, that apply for it, need it, aid, but also most importantly that they are able to use it to aid the economy to recover fast, because we need to recover very quickly as many jobs are already being lost.
All right. Thank you very much for coming through to our program. We are speaking live to CEO of Plus94 Research, Sifiso Falala. On to other